To those of you who are wondering, how could this happen? How could this happen within our safe and loving church community?
"You broke my heart," a woman's voice screamed before pulling the trigger multiple times, and in the life of a respected pastor while his wife watched in absolute horror.
Not only have we experienced the death of Brodes Perry to violence, but the rumors swelling around his murder leave us shocked and shaken.
The woman accused of killing Memphis pastor Brodes Perry will make her first court appearance later today.
Latasha Daniels is facing several charges this morning, including a murder charge. This is in Collierville from late Thursday night. Investigators are looking into a possible love triangle that turned sour.
To those of you in particular who came to know him as I did during the 5 months he was at Mississippi Boulevard, I want to say I'm heavy-hearted because of your pain.
As for the relationship with Pastor Brodes Perry, this is what we know. Records show Daniels, who's a certified anger management specialist, was a member of Pastor Perry's former church in Little Rock, Arkansas, and worked with him at a nonprofit. As for the possibility of a love affair, investigators are looking into that angle. This after the pastor's wife, who was also shot, revealed Daniels yelled, "You broke my heart," as she shot him on Thursday.
Drop a comment and let me know what you think about this story. Welcome to our channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Like and share this video to help raise awareness and spread caution. Let's begin. A 39-year-old social worker who specialized in anger management, dedicating her career to helping others control their emotions, and a secret affair that would spiral into obsession, heartbreak, and ultimately murder. What makes this case particularly disturbing isn't just violence. It's the bitter irony that cuts to the very heart of human nature. The woman who pulled that trigger, Latasha Daniels, was a professional counselor who specialized in anger management. The very thing she taught others to control became the weapon that destroyed multiple lives in a matter of seconds. The events of that April evening sent shockwaves through two communities, Memphis, Tennessee, where Pastor Brodes Perry served his congregation at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, and Little Rock, Arkansas, where Latasha Daniels built her reputation as a caring professional dedicated to helping others heal. This is the story of a man of faith who made very human mistakes, a professional helper who couldn't heal her own broken heart, and a wife who survived the unthinkable. Brodes Perry had established himself as a respected figure in the Memphis faith community. As an executive pastor at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, one of Memphis's most prominent congregations, Perry carried significant responsibility and influence. His role wasn't just ceremonial. He was actively involved in the day-to-day operations of a church that served thousands of members and played a vital role in the community. Perry's ministry journey began in Little Rock, Arkansas, where he served as a pastor at St. Mark Baptist Church from 2014 to 2018. It was during these crucial years in Little Rock that the seeds of this tragedy were planted, though no one could have predicted where they would lead. Those who knew Perry described him as charismatic and dedicated to his calling. He had the ability to connect with people, offering guidance and comfort to those struggling with life's challenges. His sermons were thoughtful, his counseling compassionate, and his presence in the community substantial. He wasn't just a Sunday morning figure. He was someone people turned to during their darkest hours. Yet Perry was also undeniably human, with all the complexities and contradictions that humanity brings. His position as a spiritual leader placed him on a pedestal, but like all pedestals, it was both elevating and isolating. The expectations placed on religious leaders can be overwhelming. To be perfect examples of faith, morality, and judgment while navigating the same human emotions and temptations that affect everyone. The Memphis religious community was shaken to its core when news of Perry's death broke. Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, a congregation with deep roots in the Memphis community, suddenly found itself grappling with the loss of a key leader under the most shocking circumstances imaginable. Members who had sought Perry's counsel, who had been baptized by him, who had counted on his spiritual guidance, were left to process not only grief, but confusion and betrayal. What made this particularly difficult for the community was the nature of the circumstances surrounding Perry's death. This wasn't random violence or a tragic accident. It was a result of choices and relationships that contradicted everything Perry publicly represented. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming for many who looked up to him as a spiritual guide. Perry's story reflects the impossible standards we sometimes place on religious leaders. We expect them to be above human frailty, immune to temptation, and perfect in judgment. When they fail to meet these impossible standards, the fall can be devastating, not just for them, but for everyone who believed in them. The woman who would take Brodes Perry's life wasn't a dangerous stranger lurking in the shadows. She was a 39-year-old professional with an impeccable reputation and a career dedicated to helping others. Latasha Daniels worked as a social worker in Little Rock, Arkansas, but her specialty made this case particularly chilling. She was an anger management counselor. Let that sink in for a moment. The woman who would commit murder in a fit of rage was literally paid to teach others how to control their anger. The irony is so profound, almost seems fictional. But the reality is that sometimes people who appear most in control are fighting the biggest battles behind closed doors. Daniels had built a successful career helping clients work through their emotional challenges. She understood the psychology of anger, the triggers that could send someone spiraling, and the techniques needed to regain control. Her colleagues respected her expertise, clients trusted her guidance, and her professional record was spotless. By all outward appearances, she was exactly the kind of person you want counseling you through difficult emotions. But there's a dark truth about helping professions that isn't often discussed. Those who choose to help others heal are sometimes trying to heal themselves. The line between professional competence and personal struggle can be thinner than anyone realizes. Daniels could teach others to manage their anger because she understood it intimately, perhaps more intimately than she ever let on. Those who knew Daniels professionally describe her as intelligent, articulate, and genuinely caring. She wasn't someone who appeared unstable or dangerous. She was a woman who had achieved professional success, commanded respect in her field, and seemed to have her life together. This makes what happened on April 4th, 2019, even more shocking. Understanding Daniels requires looking beyond her professional facade and considering the personal struggles she may have been hiding. Anger management specialists often become experts because they've wrestled with anger themselves. But knowing something intellectually and controlling it emotionally are two different things. When faced with devastating rejection, all of Daniel's professional knowledge became useless against overwhelming pain. The duality of her existence becomes clear when considering her final months. By day, she remained a competent professional, still counseling clients about managing emotions and making healthy choices. By night, she was likely consumed by thoughts of Brodes Perry, replaying conversations, planning confrontations, and feeding an obsession that would ultimately destroy both their lives. Perhaps most tragically, Daniels had access to all the resources she needed to get help. She worked in mental health, understood the importance of seeking support, and had professional networks that could have provided intervention. But shame, pride, and fear of professional consequences often prevent helping professionals from seeking the help they desperately need. The paths of Brodes Perry and Latasha Daniels first crossed in Little Rock during Perry's tenure at St. Mark Baptist Church from 2014 to 2018. What began as a connection between a pastor and a professional woman evolved into something far more complex and ultimately devastating. Affairs rarely begin with the intention of destroying lives. They typically start with innocent interactions, shared conversations, emotional connections that feel harmless. For Perry and Daniels, there was likely intellectual and emotional compatibility that drew them together. The secrecy required by their relationship created an intense bond. Shared secrets create intimacy, and the knowledge that they were the only two people who knew the full truth made their relationship feel uniquely special. This secrecy, however, was also the poison that would eventually destroy them both. For Daniels, the relationship likely filled emotional voids she may not have recognized. For Perry, it represented rebellion against the suffocating expectations of his role, a way to feel human and flawed in a position that demanded perfection. But affairs built on secrecy carry their own problems. The relationship couldn't be integrated into their normal lives, existing instead in a bubble of stolen moments that became more intense precisely because it couldn't be normalized. The decision to end the affair likely came as Perry prepared for his move to Memphis in 2018. Perhaps the distance made maintaining the relationship impractical, or the weight of guilt finally became too much. Whatever his reasons, Perry chose to end their relationship and focus on his marriage and new position. For Daniels, Perry's decision triggered something far more dangerous than heartbreak. It unleashed an obsession that would consume her entirely. She likely experienced a decision not just as the end of a relationship, but as fundamental rejection of her worth as a person. What followed were months of emotional torment. She replayed every conversation, analyzed every interaction, looking for hope or reasons for despair. The professional tools she used to help others became useless against overwhelming pain. The obsession began taking over her life. She likely found ways to monitor Perry's activities, staying connected to his world even though he cut her out. As months passed and Perry seemed to be moving on, Daniels' emotional state deteriorated. The dangerous mix of love, control, and abandonment issues created a perfect storm. She couldn't accept that the relationship was over, couldn't bear the thought of Perry being happy without her, and couldn't find a way to move forward with her own life. The days leading up to April 4th, 2019, were filled with escalating desperation for Latasha Daniels. Nearly a year had passed since Perry moved to Memphis and ended their relationship, but for Daniels, the pain was as fresh as ever. The decision to drive from Little Rock to Collierville wasn't made in sudden rage. It was calculated, requiring planning and determination. The 150-mile journey gave her plenty of time to reconsider, but Daniels was beyond rational thinking. She had convinced herself she needed to confront Perry, to make him understand what he had done to her. Daniels came armed. This wasn't spontaneous emotional outburst. It was premeditated violence. She had decided that if she couldn't get resolution through words, she was prepared to use force. The Meridian Apartments in Collierville was where Perry and his wife had built their new life, a fresh start that became the setting for unthinkable tragedy. When Daniels arrived that evening, Perry's wife answered the door. Imagine the confusion and fear as she faced a woman she didn't recognize, demanding to see her husband with dangerous intensity. When Perry came to the door, he immediately recognized Daniels and understood the gravity of the situation. The conversation that followed was likely desperate pleas, angry accusations, and growing panic. Daniels sought acknowledgement of their relationship and validation of her pain. Perry, faced with his wife's presence and complete destruction of his new life, was probably focused on damage control. The moment when confrontation turned violent is burned into his wife's memory forever. At some point, Daniels' desperation and rage overpowered whatever restraint she had left. "You broke my heart," she screamed, and in those 4 words, we hear months of obsessive thinking, emotional torture, and building rage. This wasn't just about their affair's end. It was about every disappointment, every abandonment she had ever experienced. Perry had become the symbol of everything that had hurt her. The gunshots that followed shattered more than the apartment complex's quiet. They shattered lives, families, and communities. Perry was struck multiple times, dying in front of his helpless wife. But Daniels wasn't finished. In her rage, she also shot Perry's wife, though not fatally. Daniels didn't try to flee. The woman who had planned this confrontation seemed to collapse emotionally once the violence was over. The anger that had sustained her was gone, replaced by dawning realization of what she had done. When police arrived, they found devastating violence and emotional wreckage. Perry was dead, his wife wounded and in shock, and Daniels was present with the weapon nearby. The arrest of Latasha Daniels marked the beginning of a complex legal process. Initial charges reflected the severity: first-degree murder for Perry's death, attempted murder for shooting his wife, and additional weapon-related charges. These carried potential for life in prison or even death penalty. What followed in the courtroom was almost as disturbing as the crime itself. Daniels' behavior during court appearances revealed a woman struggling with reality. Reports describe her alternately smiling, crying, and at one point, blowing kisses, behavior suggesting severe mental illness or complete disconnect from her situation's severity. This bizarre courtroom behavior raised questions about Daniels' mental state and competency to stand trial. The woman, who had been a respected professional, was displaying behavior that seemed erratic and inappropriate for someone facing murder charges. The prosecution focused on the crime's premeditated nature. They emphasized that Daniels had made conscious decisions to drive from Little Rock to Memphis, to bring a weapon, to carry out a planned attack. Her emotional state didn't excuse the violence. The defense faced the difficult task of humanizing someone who had committed an inhuman act. They had to help the jury understand psychological factors leading to crime without excusing it, balancing acknowledgement of Daniels' professional background with explaining how someone with her training could act so violently. The case raised complex questions about whether Daniels' professional knowledge made her more or less culpable. Did her training mean she should have known better, or did it provide insight into psychological factors leading to the crime?
We are still in the information gathering stage. I certainly have talked to Ms. Daniels. Unfortunately, and not unsurprisingly, I can't tell you what I know. And so at this point, we just are continuing with our not guilty plea, absolutely. We come back May 14th. That is a probable cause or preliminary hearing. It is not a trial. The state has to put on proof.
For Perry's wife, Legal proceedings represented another trauma layer. She had to deal with physical and emotional aftermath while facing public revelation of her husband's affair and the complex emotions of being both victim and someone betrayed by the other victim. The Memphis community struggled to process what happened to their pastor. Some rallied around his memory, focusing on ministerial work rather than personal failings. Others felt betrayed, struggling to reconcile faith with reality of their pastor's actions. This heartbreaking story teaches us profound lessons about the destructive power of deception in relationships. Perry's affair wasn't just betrayal of marriage vows. It was the first domino in a chain of events that would ultimately cost him his life and devastate everyone around him. Affairs don't exist in isolation. They create webs of deception that trap everyone involved and often spiral beyond anyone's control. The case highlights particular dangers when affairs involve people in helping professions. Both Perry and Daniels were in positions where they were expected to help others navigate emotional challenges, yet they were unable to manage their own emotional situations effectively. The irony is devastating. Two people professionally equipped to handle relationship problems created a situation that spiraled completely out of control. For Daniels, this serves as a tragic example of how professional expertise doesn't provide immunity from personal demons. She spent her career teaching anger management, but couldn't apply those techniques to her own overwhelming emotions. Her story reminds us that knowledge and application are two very different things, especially when we're in the grip of powerful emotions. One of the most important lessons is about recognizing warning signs of dangerous obsession. Daniels didn't become violent overnight. There was likely a months-long process of escalating obsessive thinking, emotional dysregulation, and planning that preceded the crime. Understanding these warning signs could potentially prevent similar tragedies in the future. The obsessive thinking that consumed Daniels is more common than many people realize, but it rarely escalates to violence. However, when it does, the results can be devastating. Learning to recognize when heartbreak has crossed the line into dangerous obsession, and knowing how to seek help when it does, could save lives. This case raises important questions about supporting people in helping professions during personal crises. The expectation that professional helpers should have their lives under control can prevent them from seeking help when they need it most. Creating better support systems for people in these roles could prevent similar tragedies. The story illustrates the importance of healthy relationship skills and emotional regulation. Both Perry and Daniels made choices that escalated rather than de-escalated their emotional situation. Learning how to end relationships respectfully, process rejection healthily, and seek appropriate support during emotional crises are life skills everyone needs. For communities of faith, this case raises difficult questions about supporting religious leaders while maintaining accountability. The pedestal we place spiritual leaders on can be both elevating and isolating, creating pressure that sometimes leads to exactly the behavior we're trying to prevent. This tragedy reminds us that emotional pain must be processed in healthy ways. Daniel's pain was real. The heartbreak, abandonment, feeling discarded were genuine emotions deserving acknowledgement and healing. But her choice to respond with violence transformed her from trauma victim to perpetrator of devastating violence. The case also highlights a particular vulnerability of helping professionals to burnout, emotional exhaustion, and personal crisis. People who spend careers managing others' emotional problems may neglect their own mental health needs. Creating better support systems, reducing stigma around seeking help, and recognizing signs of professional burnout could prevent similar tragedies. One of the most painful aspects is how preventable this seems in retrospect. Warning signs were there, resources for help were available, and knowledge of what was happening was present. Yet the combination of pride, shame, fear, and obsession created a perfect storm no one could stop. This case serves as a reminder that mental health crises can affect anyone, regardless of profession, education, or apparent stability. Daniels wasn't a stereotypical criminal. She was an educated professional with a successful career and reputation for helping others. Her transformation from helper to killer reminds us that we all have capacity for both great good and terrible destruction. For survivors of similar situations, this case provides both cautionary tale and message of hope. Perry's wife survived both physical attack and emotional trauma of learning about her husband's affair. Her journey toward healing represents resilience of human spirit and possibility of moving forward even after unimaginable tragedy. The tragedy of April 4th, 2019, reminds us that our choices have consequences extending far beyond ourselves. A secret affair, broken heart, and moment of deadly rage created ripple effects impacting multiple communities years later. The lives lost and damaged at night can never be restored, but perhaps by understanding what went wrong, we can work to prevent similar tragedies. This case challenges us to be more honest in relationships, more proactive in seeking help when needed, and more aware of warning signs indicating when someone is moving from emotional distress to dangerous behavior. It reminds us that professional competence doesn't equal personal immunity, that secrets can become toxic, and that people who appear most stable may be fighting the biggest battles behind closed doors. Most importantly, it reminds us of our shared humanity, our capacity for both love and destruction, our need for connection and healing, and our responsibility to care for one another in ways that prevent rather than enable tragedy. The story of Brodes Perry, Latasha Daniels, and the wife who survived them both is ultimately about all of us, about the choices we make, the pain we carry, and the hope that we can learn to do better. Thank you for watching True Crime Station. Your engagement and support mean everything, and I'm grateful you chose to spend your time learning about these important cases. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next episode where we'll dive into another case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about human nature.